All right, we are here for a Thursday night live stream. What is going on? Next thing you know, it's going to not be on Wednesdays, and then my shirt is going to change. And what else is going to happen here? no, it's a busy time of year, right? Christmas is next week. We got things going on. I actually had to tear apart the studio here to take some of my equipment over to record a cantata. My wife and daughters were singing it. Beautiful, but I'm not going to share it here. But nonetheless, I'm back up here, ready to roll. We're doing this today because yesterday was just a crazy day. Today was kind of busy too. But we'll see if my voice can handle this probably 2-hour live stream. So just a heads up to everybody. I wonder if it's a bad thing to tell people how long a live stream is going to be before it starts. It's kind of like when you're preaching a sermon and you tell people there's 7 points and they're counting. Right now, oh, he's only on 3.3 and we're already in here for 30 minutes. Okay, I don't preach that long, but anyway, you get the point. Today we're going to talk about 3 different things. It's been a relatively busy textual critical week. There's some interesting things that have kind of popped up over the last few days we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the distigmai in Vaticanus. Dr. Gordon Nehemiah has published his results, and his findings are very interesting, so we're going to go over that. We're also going to take a look at this discovery of an amulet found in North Germany. If you're looking at your screen right now, you will see that I have a map of Europe up there, and right around here, it's in red because an interesting artifact has been found there relating to the New Testament. And then I'm also going to share the papyrus results of that study I've been telling you about. So I posted a few images in the NT textual criticism group, just to kind of whet your appetite for the kind of details that I'm able to get from this papyrus report, and I will show you some of those things. So before we dive into our topics, let's pop over to the comments and see how you all are doing. So we have Mr. Moreno. He's already sleeping. Reason belief. Woohoo, England. Here we go. I'll show you. Woohoo, England. There you go. England, right there. Woo. All right, let me go back here. There we go. And we've got Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak in the house. How's it going? He is not moderating today. I will keep an eye on the comments, and if I need a moderator, maybe Mr. Moreno, perhaps you might be willing to do the honors if need be. We have also Kevin. I saw Kevin in there earlier today. How's it going, Mr. Kevin? Hope everything is well. And things are well with me. So here we go. So that's everybody. Reason belief. How's it going? I don't think I've seen you around here before. I don't recognize the name. Maybe I just haven't seen you. But God bless you, Dwayne. Hope you are well. Yes. Doing much better. Was kind of sick last week and the week before. Doing much better today. Doing much better. Last couple days, actually. So as long as this stays good and I'm healthy for Christmas, right? So that's what we're hoping for. So I've been singing today, been preaching today, and here we are on the live stream. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different today. Normally we're talking about text critical things in trying to determine which readings are which readings and looking at things from different perspectives. But today we're focusing on those 3 specific items. So let's do the first one here. I want to take a look at the papyrus results. So we're going to take a look at this spreadsheet that I have here because this just summarizes everything so beautifully. And you may be asking yourself, well, Dwayne, you're a Byzantine priority. Why are you bothering with the papyrus? Why are you bothering with the papyrus results? Well, it's just because they're papyrus and just because they're not, from Byzantine priorities position, the best manuscripts to get all our data from, doesn't mean that there's no value to them. And I was just kind of like, I've been thinking about this for a while, and then when all the Wes Huff stuff started to break out. So if you're not aware, Wes Huff is an apologist actually up here in Canada, in Toronto, and he recently faced off with Billy Carson and totally wiped the floor with him. But it was there where it just kind of solidified this idea further that I was thinking about with regards to the papyrus, is that there is an apologetic value to them. Now, we wouldn't, as Byzantine priorities, go to the papyrus and say, oh, we're going to take this reading over what's in the Byzantine text because it's an older papyri. It's oldest and best. Okay, I'm not there. Just because I'm doing the analysis on the papyrus doesn't mean I think oldest is best is not. But we can say, generally speaking, that we have very early attestation to the New Testament. Now, we can quibble about the micro things in there, right? We can quibble about the individual words, and we do on this channel. That's partly what we do. We quibble about those. But when you're talking to an unbeliever who doesn't know anything about the Bible, right? The first thing you're going to do, right? Or I should say the first thing you're not going to do is present the unbeliever with all the different textual discussions that are out there. That's not where you go, right? If you're an evangelist worth your salt, you typically stay away from that. You wouldn't go up to a potential convert, right, and start going, well, you want to believe the Calvinist way and not the Arminian way. You're just not going to do that, right? You're just going to share the gospel. That's what you do. And you're going to bring up some physical evidence. Maybe you'll go to the prophets and show some fulfilled prophecies, or maybe you'll go to archaeology and show how what the Bible says is true. Like you don't need to go down to the individual letter level for that kind of apologetic. And I think when we come to things like the Papyrus, they're really ancient, they're really old, and it shows that, generally speaking, the New Testament is there. So there's definitely an apologetic value, and that's partly why I wanted to take a look at the Papyrus manuscript. And there's other reasons too. I wanted to see how much they correlate to one another and that sort of thing, which is going to be for later analysis, because this isn't really about correlation, but more about representation. So when we look at the Papyrus manuscripts in this spreadsheet that I have, let me pop it open here. Okay, this is more about representation. How much of the New Testament is represented in the papyri manuscripts? And I went down to the verse level. And this is where I think, excuse me, this is where I think we haven't seen any sort of analysis done on the papyri in this way. Undoubtedly, the ECM probably has this data somewhere in a database that you could probably get somehow. I'm not sure how to do that. I'm not sure if the APIs are open or anything like that. So I just simply went to the wiki site where they have a list of the papyrus, and I went and I filled this worksheet with all of the verses that are contained within each papyrus manuscript. There's 138 papyrus manuscripts. And I went through each one and tagged every single verse that appears in that papyrus manuscript. Okay, and that's what you're looking at here. So in here, it's not sorted. I can sort it. Excuse me. There we go. Hopefully this doesn't crash. This is a pretty big spreadsheet. There's thousands of records in here. So I got every verse in here, and this isn't every verse in the Bible. This is every verse that appears in the papyrus manuscripts. There's a few statistics we'll look at, which makes that make more sense. But this is just so you get an idea of what I did to get there. So along here we have the verse details, and then I broke this down just so that we can get it out in reports a lot easier. And then the ID number here, the verse number, is just there so that if we start manipulating the data and we need to sort it, we can sort it back to its regular order easily. So now, excuse me. So what we do is we look here along the top. Oh, we're almost there. Did I hide those rows? I think I did. Oh, there they are. So there's all the manuscripts. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide some of these rows just so we can see what's going on, because I don't think we really need to see these. The numbers along the top are just simply for counting. I had a macro for this, which I had to take out. This is the public copy, so this will be available. Once we're done here, I'll post the link, and then you can go in and fiddle with the data all you want. But there was a macro, but I can't do that publicly because Microsoft frowns upon sharing macros that are unsigned, and I'm not spending the money to make it signed. It's just not worth it for VBA. So let me hide these so we can get a better glimpse at what's happening here. And so what I did is you're going to notice that there's an X in each one of these cells where the manuscript, right, in this case P1, where there's a verse reference. Now, it's important to recognize here that the papyrus manuscripts are very lacunous, right? And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of holes in there from moths or animals, or just time has sort of ate away at parts of the papyrus. Papyrus isn't very durable. So there's holes all over the place, sides are shredded. And so in those places, we may not be able to see what verse was there or what words were there. The end of the page, I think P45 or P65, one of the two. The bottom right-hand corner is rounded out because of the way in which it had degraded, and so those verses aren't available. So if a whole verse is not in the papyrus manuscript, it's not counted. But if there is a partial verse, that verse is counted as representative. So if we have the last 5 letters of, say, Matthew 1:9, I counted that as attestation to that verse. Now, if those verses were questioned, not questioned, if those characters were questioned, and in INTF, if they're uncertain as to what the character is, but you know there's a character there, they will put a little dot underneath the character that they've guessed it to be. And typically, that's an educated guess. It's probably right, but not necessarily. In those instances, I've also included those if there were 5 characters in the verse and all 5 of them had dots under them. I considered those as having verse attestation in the papyrus manuscript. Okay, so what that means is that if you come to this spreadsheet looking for a specific verse in a specific papyrus, and then you go to that papyrus manuscript and check, you may not see the whole verse, okay? So that doesn't mean that that verse is entirely attested to in that manuscript. But nonetheless, we count it because it does attest to something in that verse. Okay, that's the lowest level we can go as far as being able to determine quality of data, stuff like that. So we have P1. I've shown here where every time where Matthew 1:1 and Matthew 1:9 is attested in Papyrus 1, and that is I have the median date here. I could probably go. Yeah, it's a 300. Okay. I'm just going to put this back. Where was that? 4. Yeah, don't worry about these formulas. I'm a nerd. So I think P1 was like 200 to 300. Again, there's a sheet on here which relates those. So you can go and check easily what the dates are. This is just the median date. So because papyrus manuscripts are notoriously hard to date, they're usually given a range. Whether it's from 200 AD to 300 AD or 380 to 500 AD. I just took the median, so basically the average. There's a slight difference between a median and average. I don't think that really applies too much here because there's not many numbers. But I just took the median between the two, and that's what you're seeing here. So the P1 median date is 250 AD. Now, these are early. These are very early. To give you an idea of how important these are from an early perspective, again, not saying I think the earliest is best, but there's apologetic value. We just talked about that. But the reason why this is important is because the next batch of manuscripts are the unsealed manuscripts. And the unsealed manuscripts, we do not have many that are before the 8th century. Most of them are 8th, 9th, and 10th century. So having 138 papyrus manuscripts dating from 200 AD to 700 AD is if you're the earliest is best, that's kind of a big deal. But this is also a big deal for the fact that we have all of them here. Now, the interesting thing that we don't often hear about too much when it comes to the papyri is they represent a very local text. All the papyrus were found in Oxyrhynchus. And one other city, I forget what it's called, Grenville and Hunt, excavated a whole bunch of them. And apparently there's a whole bunch of them that haven't even been cataloged yet or published yet. So we don't know what the contents of them are. But these 139 fragments that we have, we have them here and we have all the data. So taking a look a little further here, in here I have a count of all the verses that appear in that manuscript. So in this case, P1 has 19 verses. P2 only has 4 verses. P3 has 15 verses. P4 has 95, so on and so forth. Let me, I'll just use the mouse. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. How is that? Let's pop this over here. We'll make that smaller. There we go. Yeah, so P8, again, 29 verses. And again, I haven't seen anywhere where they have been able to count in a normalized way the number of verses in a papyrus manuscript. You may see a list of manuscripts and stuff, but again, I don't think it's come down to this way. So anyway, so I went through and I populated all of these rows. just everywhere where there was a verse, I put an X in there, and I X'd down for each passage. And so what this has allowed me to do is to create a routine or an algorithm to take this data into this sheet, the worksheet, and pop that into the data sheet in a listed way like this. This is what we call a normalized data table. And this isn't completely normalized. I haven't met all the criteria for every, right? This isn't technically a database, right? This is an Excel sheet. And a bunch of people are gonna get mad because you call an Excel sheet a database. You don't do that. It's not a database. Although we can make it act like a database in certain instances. Nonetheless, we now have a record with each manuscript and each verse that's in it, and we can do a whole bunch of analysis on that. So again, there was a VBA script that runs the details out of here and populates the data sheet, and then this data sheet in turn populates all of these other sheets. We're going to take a look at these because they are super interesting. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. So this table here, this little tiny table, which is now going to be bigger because I'm going to make it bigger. There we go. Gives us a reference to how many verses. Oh, this ain't right. Hang on here. It's chugging. It is chugging. Let's, there we go. Okay. There we go. That's better. Oh, you know what? I should probably share this one detail first before we go in there. So the representation. Oh wow, I'm having some issues with the stream. I'm dropping frames apparently a lot. Hang on one second here. I am going to come over here. Sorry guys, just give me 1 second. Let's see if I can figure something out with these dropped frames. Yeah, it's chugging along real good. I wonder. You know what was happening? Logos was indexing earlier, and I wonder if it still is. Let me see if I can... How's it going? Am I really choppy for those who are listening? I'm gonna wait for the comments there. I am going to open up my sermon notes. I keep my notes for my YouTube channel in my sermon notes section. Then I can just go back to it when I need it. It's great. But the thing is running Logos on this machine is rather painful sometimes. Okay. All right. Thanks, Helga. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go on to the Logos site because the website tends to work better. And I'll get my notes from there. Excuse me. And I'll close Logos. And maybe, because I'm noticing it is a little bit choppy here. I'm going to go to the task manager. Getting risky. You're going to see all my tasks. All right. I am looking for... see. I mean, the other thing it could be my spreadsheet is totally messing everything up. I can't see that being the case, but yeah, I'm dropping a lot of frames here. Let me see. We might just have to go with it the way it is. No, PC's good on all fronts. Okay. I think we're good. It may just be Starlink is Starlink. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's come back here. Let me get my stuff up here. Yeah, so this is the worksheet. One of the statistics that we want to see is this, is how much of the entire New Testament is actually attested to in the papyrus manuscripts. And in this example here, out of 7,958 verses, that's how many verses are in the New Testament, 5,506 verses are attested to. So that equals a total of 69.19%. So basically 70% of the entire New Testament can be constructed based on the papyri and just the papyri. Now, it's not 100%. I didn't really expect that. But again, 69.19%. You know what I should do? I'm going to start recording this. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to record it. That way, if it doesn't work out, I can at least upload something afterwards. There we go. Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, so the total amount, again, is 7,958 verses in the New Testament. And of those 7,958 verses, 5,506 are attested to in the papyrus manuscripts. Again, going back to what I was talking about, what I call attested to, right? It's attested to if there's at least one letter in the verse in the manuscript, then I mark it as being included in that manuscript. Now, again, it's not fully included. I get that. I mean, we could put another field in there to say fully included or not, right? That would be kind of interesting. But that would require to go and look at every single one. That would probably take ages. But nonetheless, that's our attestation, essentially 70%. Now, you're looking at this data here where it's called counts. And in this column, what we're looking at, okay. Thanks, Ankalagonit. Yes, great. Thank you. Yeah, I like my bit rates are really cruddy. I wonder if I can like drop the stream. No, I don't want to do that. Can I do that? I don't know if I can do that while I'm going live. I can try. Let's see. No, it's locked. Everything's locked because I'm currently opening. That's fine. Okay, you know what? If I have to upload afterwards, I might have to do that. I don't want to. I might have to do that. That's frustrating. All right. Now, so you'll notice here that we have a counts column. And what the counts column is doing, it is basically counting every time a verse appears. So in this instance, Matthew 1:1, out of all the papyrus that exist that we currently know about, Matthew 1:1 appears once. And if we just use a few cheat codes or whatever, we know that it occurs in P1. So P1, Matthew 1:1 in Papyrus 1 is the only instance of Matthew 1:1 in the papyrus manuscripts. Again, I mean, you could do this all day. The first 9 verses only appear in Papyrus 1. Matthew 1:9, Matthew 1:10, Matthew 1:10 and Matthew 1:11 do not appear at all. We don't have a papyrus manuscript for those. But what's interesting here is if we just change this, we'll sort the largest to smallest, and we can get an idea of which verses has the most attestation among the papyrus manuscripts. So in this instance, John chapter 1, verses 26, 28, 33, 35, and 38 have 6 papyrus manuscripts. 6 papyrus manuscripts which attest to that verse. So again, you just kind of come over here. We got for John 1:38, P120, P119, P75, P66, P5, all attest to John 1:35. So again, these are just some interesting results. I don't know exactly what we would do with those, but it just shows that there's passages in the New Testament that have a lot of attestation amongst the papyrus manuscripts. Then you go 5 instances. So John 1:25 has 5 references or 5 places amongst all the papyri that references that verse. And again, most of them here. Oh, we can't do that. There we go. So a number of those. Now, I could sit here and count them, but this is why it's in an Excel sheet, because I'm not going to sit here and count them. But you can see there's a number of verses with 4 references and 3 references and 2 references. And, of course, the fewer references, the more times you see that. So now, if we come to our first sheet here, this gives us a total of how many verses are attested to once, how many verses are attested to twice, how many are attested to 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and then, of course, 7, 8, 9, there's no attestation. So the highest verse, the verse with the most attestation, comes from the Gospel of John. Those 5 verses we showed you are attested to 6 times. And then, of course, the verses that are attested to 5 times are 18. Verses attesting to 4 times are 52 verses. And then, of course, 419 verses are attested to at least 3 times. And then 2,100 are twice. And then 284 are attested to once. Now, I think I have some percentages here, but I think this works out to about half of all verses. So of all the verses that are attested to in the papyri manuscripts, about half of them only have 1 verse attested to. More than half, about half of them have, again, more than 1 verse attested to. So that's kind of the breakdown there. Now, if we go to percentage of verses by papyri, this gives us an indication of what papyrus manuscripts has the most attestation. And this probably isn't a surprise. I think most people know that these are the biggest papyrus manuscripts. But what's interesting is after the first 7 or 8 manuscripts, how much that attestation drops off. So, for example, when we're looking at the first the biggest, essentially, this is sorted biggest to smallest by percentage, not by verse size, although there's probably correlation there, but by percentage. So P46 is the largest papyrus manuscript, containing 21% of the New Testament. So that one papyrus manuscript alone contains 21% of New Testament verses. And then, of course, P75, the next largest one, at 17%. 14%, 10%, 10%, and then it just drops down. Now, what's interesting is out of the 138 papyrus manuscripts we have, only 5 contain 10% or more of the New Testament text. Now, I did some analysis of those 5 biggest manuscripts, and here's what I came up with. So, again, to be honest, I probably should have included P99 and P72 just because they are, I mean, when you take the average, they're above that. But I just stuck with the 10% and above. So of these 5 biggest manuscripts, there's a couple statistics here. Do I need to make this bigger every time I go in? I think I do. That's annoying. Yeah, so of these 5 manuscripts, 84.85%, okay, that's P45, P46, P66, P74, and P75 attest to 84.85% of all the papyri's attestation. So remember, all the papyri attest to about 70% of the whole New Testament. So of that 70%, 85% of that is just in these 5 verses, in these 5 papyri alone. So these 5 papyri make up 85% of all the verses in the papyrus manuscript. So very interesting. And then when you take that as a whole, as of what it represents in the New Testament, remember, they all represent, all papyrus represents 70%, give or take, right? 70% of the New Testament. These 5 verses represent almost, excuse me, attest to, when combined together, almost 60% of the New Testament. So these 5 manuscripts, these 5 papyrus manuscripts, based on their size, are probably weighted more and give more overview, I guess, of the New Testament. And then the rest, the remaining 132 papyrus manuscripts, makes up the rest of that 10%. So you can see that it's heavily weighted toward these larger ones. And that's not a surprise. We're not surprised. I don't think many text critics will be surprised. I don't think many scholars in the field will be surprised by that result, because everybody knows that the papyrus manuscripts, most of them are just tiny little fragments with just a handful of verses on there. So if you take a look here, I've broken down the number of verses of these 5 manuscripts in each book. Now, this is a distinct count, and that just simply means that we're counting, if a verse appears, we're counting it once. So if a verse appears in all 5 manuscripts, it only counts that as one. This gives us a total of everything compared to how many New Testament verses there are. So you can see the distinct count there. And then, our biggest book by far, actually, this is surprising, is Acts. The book of Acts has the most verses attested to it. And then John, and then Luke, Mark and Matthew, relatively small compared to the book of Hebrews, which is almost entirely represented here I think there are 303 verses in Hebrews, almost entirely represented by these 5 manuscripts. Super interesting. First and Second Peter are interesting because although they don't have a lot of attestation based on these 5 papyrus, they are fully attested to in 2 other manuscripts, and we can take a look at some of those charts here in a moment. So that's kind of a breakdown of those 5 important by size papyrus manuscripts. So before we go on to the next bit, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the comments. I know some of you guys are commenting in there. I see Ex Receptus says, "Good afternoon, fellow brethren. How's it going, Ex Receptus? Maybe the real testament is the friends we make along the way." Indeed. I got lots to say about that. Before I started the channel, I'll just after I started the channel, there's this sort of realization that the people that you talk to on the other side of the discussion, right, whether it's King James Version onlyist or a TR guy or whatever, or even a critical text guy, they're real people. They're real people. I know we know that. We know that intuitively, but we don't really understand that until we sit and talk with that real person. And being able to talk with people like Jeff Riddle, Nick Sayers, Peter Gurry, Elijah Hickson, people who don't necessarily hold to my views, right? Being able to sit and talk with them just gives you a greater appreciation that they're people. And so, you make friends. I have Brian Ross on the King James side, Christopher Yetzer, lots of good things to say about these guys. I made a number of friends along the way, and I'm so grateful for it. I can totally agree with that. All right, let's pop up here. Woo England. Hi, all you TC fans. How's it going, Helga? Good to see you here. Mr. Moreno, the oldest and best manuscripts are the ones that you read. I guess kind of, sort of. Now, if you have a whole bunch accessible to you and you're constructing a Greek New Testament, I don't know if I would hold the same the same conclusion, but good enough, I guess. Yeah. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak says, "This is generally why I use the KJV standard thing to remove most of these issues. I don't deny they exist, but I downplay them when at a basic level." Yeah. Again, when we talk about this kind of stuff to unbelievers, to people who don't know the Lord, our goal isn't to convince them to use a KJV or an NIV or to be convinced that the papyrus, even though they're early, they're not the greatest, or look at the business. They don't know about this stuff. They don't care at that point, right? The only thing that we should care about when we're talking to unbelievers at this point is that they know who Jesus is. That's the most important thing. And then then they can enter that conversation, right? Again, there's certain apologetic value to a lot of these old papyrus stuff, and even Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, as much as we don't like some of the readings, there's still apologetic value. Like, again, you come down to Wes Huff, who totally destroyed Billy Carson by reaching behind him and pulling off a Codex Sinaiticus off of his shelf and saying, "I got it right here, the crucifixion this year." Okay, there's definite value there. Seeing it more as a milk versus meat, absolutely. So I see it as more of a meat offered to idols issue. Interesting. Yes, choppy. So I hope, my stream is still looking like junk, but hopefully it will get a little better. I know it's probably, people are getting annoyed with it and I think are leaving. All right. Brandon Back says, "Sounds good here." That's good. My connection has been recalibrating a few times. It freezes for half a second to a couple of seconds intermittently and is smooth in between. Okay. Yeah. We'll just have to roll with it. We have Starlink, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. The uploads are never consistent. And I need lots of upload to be able to get these videos out to you. All right. Let's come back to our handy dandy spreadsheet here. And before we do that, I'll just check a few things on my end here. I wonder if, no, you know what? I don't want to touch this. The second I start touching this stuff, it's gonna make the it's gonna make the live stream go weird. All right. So let's take a look at. So this was the which sheet are we on here? Count of attested verses. We did this one. Percentage of papyri. 5 biggest papyri. Oh, I lost it. Oh, what is going on here? All right. So this is the papyri table. The sound is smooth, so your stream is really no problem doing. Awesome. How's it going, Alan? Good to see you. Coming soon, the Alexandrian Western Parallel Bible. That would actually be quite interesting to look at. All right. So here's the next kind of sheet here to look at. So I am utilizing something called a pivot table. If you are an Excel nerd, you know what a pivot table is and how useful they are. So basically all this is doing is this is giving us a count of how many verses I get distinct verses doesn't really matter from this perspective, but it does for the total down at the bottom. So this total will be distinct verses. It will not be a count of total verses in the papyri, right? That's important to recognize, because if we take the total count of all the verses in the papyri, there's going to be duplicates in there. It's going to count those verses that appear in 6 times and 5 times. But that's what's happening in these counts. But when it sums the grand total, it's grand totaling the distinct count and not the total count. Important to recognize, because if you base your number or you're thinking off the wrong number, you're going to get a wrong result. So again, just to recognize that when going through the data. But you can see here, if I sort this, can I sort this? I don't know if I can sort this. Pivot tables are sometimes frustrating. No, I can't. I can if I do this. Oh. There we go. I can if I do this, though. If I copy these. Actually, you know what? I don't need to do that, because that's pretty much what this table is. Yeah, that's pretty much what this table is. Sorted based on percentage. If you were to sort this based on total verses, I don't think it changes a whole lot. Again, you still have the top 5, because again, those percentages are based on the whole New Testament. So the fewer, the lower the percentages. So that will be that will be right. But yeah, again, you can see which manuscripts have the most amount of verses in them. You come down to the very bottom, and we got a few tiny little manuscripts with just one tiny little verse in it, right? Chances are that's not going to be a whole verse in there either. But you can see 0.01% of the total New Testament count. P76 has 2 verses. Again, you could look at the results on here. You could probably find it in the other sheet and find out which one. If this was a pivot table, you could double click on it and drill down and get the results instantly there. That's what the other table would have been for. But nonetheless, let's come over to book attestation. This is where it gets really interesting. Now that pie chart, that's insane. Okay. That's not 2 Corinthians. That's everything. Or is that John? Yeah. So everything would look like this. Okay. That's every papyrus manuscript in a pie chart. Let me, let me zoom that in. You can't even read it because there's just so much data there. So can I get rid of this guy? Yes, I can. Okay. So if we pick specific books, so Hebrews is an interesting book. Because in the book of Hebrews, we have 100% attestation of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. So if I come down here, where is Hebrews? You can see how it works out there. Now, again, this is not a distinct count of verses. This is just simply the pie chart basing its section here off of the total count of verses. So Hebrews has something like 303 verses, and you can see just P46 on its own represents 300 verses. So you have almost full 100% attestation of the book of Hebrews just in P46 alone. Now I went through and calculated what it would take to get full attestation. Now you can't see that from this pie graph just because the way it is, but I think it was like 3 manuscripts. I have them in a document. I've sent them away. I'm going to see if we can get that published somewhere. It would be interesting to see the results of those, like a more formalized report come up. But yeah, you can see the book of Hebrews is attested to by, now I know that says 2 Corinthians. Why does it say, is that second? No, this is Hebrews. This is Hebrews. Okay, hang on. That's why. There we go. The filters in there. Yeah, so you can see that there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different papyri that contain the book of Hebrews. And amongst those, P13 and P46 have the most attestation to the book of Hebrews. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think there were 3 manuscripts that were required to get full attestation to Hebrews. It was P46, P13, and one of these other small ones to make up one verse. Yeah, it's super interesting. Now, again, same thing. I think 1 Corinthians, it didn't have 100% attestation, but it was like 3 or 4 verses shy of being fully attested to. We'll see that in another table here. But again, you can see the results here. P46 represents most of it. P11/P14. Again, those two there, P11 and P14, they were actually, whoa, excuse me. Whoa. Sorry, guys. These 2 manuscripts here, P11 and P14, what they represented was apparently 2 papyrus manuscripts that were later realized that they were the same ones because of their nature of being little bits and pieces. They finally realized they were the same, and so they just kind of plugged them all under the same one. I think they're technically P11, and that happened to 3 manuscripts, which is why there's P141, but there's only 138 manuscripts, because that discrepancy is that's why. But again, you can see the breakdown of the verses here. Another one I think was Galatians had full attestation. I'll pop this one up here. And so, again, interesting here. The breakdown, P46 and P141, contain basically, between the 2 of them, they make up the entire book of Galatians. And then P51 and P135 have a few little dealios there. Revelation is interesting. Again, we don't have full attestation to Revelation. We don't have much attestation to it. But you can see we have P115 and 127 make up most of Revelation, with a few smatterings here and there. Again, Revelation is just one of those difficult books textually. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to download this and play with it, I mean, you can play with the filters and get a whole bunch of different results here. Now, this is a just a straight up data table providing all the manuscripts and then the count by book. So you can go to Matthew and you can see that there's 294 verses, which by the way is really low. I think there's just over 1,000 verses in the book of Matthew. So Matthew and Mark didn't have, I think it was only like 20% attestation in the papyrus manuscripts, with John having close to 100% and Luke having somewhere around 70 or 80%. So interesting to me that Matthew and Mark wouldn't be as attested to as the other Gospels, and it's by a fair amount too. But yeah, so you can see all the papyrus manuscripts that have a reference to Matthew in there somewhere, and then it breaks the count down. So P62 has 6 verses in the book of Matthew, right? So Mark only has 4 manuscripts. Look at that, with 200 verses attested to. Luke has 1,100 verses attested to, and there's a number of manuscripts there. And John, almost full attestation, 1,900 verses, and it's got the most manuscripts attesting to it. So let me pop over here. This was the one that I shared on the NT Textual Criticism site. So this is the sheet which gives us a representation of how many verses, or how complete is the book in the papyrus manuscripts. And again, this is just the papyrus manuscripts. This isn't no uncials, there's no minuscules, no lectionaries, no versional details, just the papyrus. And this is what we have. Again, this is very good to use, I would think, as an apologetic device to say, look, like just scraps of papyrus from Oxyrhynchus, like just the scraps, right? We can make up pretty much the whole New Testament, almost 70% of it, right here, right now. So you can see the results. Let me zoom in here. We might just have to yeah, there we go. Oh, it's doing some funky stuff here. Hold on. There we go. All right. So yeah, Matthew, Mark of the Gospels, least attested to in the papyrus with 27%. Luke, just boom, goes up to 72%. And then we have John and Acts, which are very highly attested to. 14 verses in Acts are not attested to. The rest are. John, I think it worked out to like 6 verses not attested to, and the rest of it is. So essentially, these are 100%. We're good, 100%. Then we have Romans, 70%. 1 Corinthians, 99.54%. I believe that's 2 verses. 2 verses that are not attested to in the papyri. And then we have 2 Corinthians fully attested, Galatians fully attested, Ephesians fully attested, Philippians mostly attested, Colossians mostly attested, and then Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians, half, 2 Thessalonians, hardly anything, 1 Timothy, hardly anything, 2 Timothy, where's 2 Timothy? 2 Timothy is the only book in the New Testament which has 0% attestation. So there is no papyri manuscript with 2 Timothy. And again, I think that is fairly well known. Again, these statistics haven't been really talked about. I think this is the first time this kind of information is available. So Titus, Philemon, 50% essentially, and then Hebrews fully attested to. Again, in one papyrus manuscript, I forget which one it is. It was fully attested to with the exception of 3 verses, which are made up in 2 other manuscripts. So James, mostly fully attested. 1st and 2nd Peter, they are fully attested in essentially 1 manuscript. I think, again, a handful of verses had to come from a 2nd manuscript. So these 2 books, 1st and 2nd Peter, actually 1st, 2nd Peter and Jude can be made from just 2 manuscripts. 2 papyrus manuscripts is all you need to make 100% attestation. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. I know there was some question in the early church as to whether these would be canonized or not, and I think maybe that is possibly reflecting that. But then again, who knows? Who knows, right? Again, we're talking about Egyptian papyri, so maybe there's a regional thing about that, which is why it's important not to base textual decisions off of, a small regional position. But nonetheless, I know I'm a broken record. I think there's some apologetic value here. The book of Jude, full attestation, and then Revelation with close to half. So yeah, here we go. James just popped in there. What is James saying? I'm going to pop this open here. Where we at? There we go. James is saying, "Hello, everyone. I appear to have arrived." Yes, you do appear to have arrived. Unless, of course, you are a bot, in which case your bot has arrived. Are you a bot, James? Are you a bot? All right. There's a papyrus manuscript of 2 Timothy. It's just Sahidic and not Greek. Yeah. So because I can't read Sahidic and because I can't really get into the ins and outs of that, I left the versional information out of this specific report. I'll call it a report because that's what we would have called it. This specific report is just strictly Greek papyrus, P1 to P141, with those 3 papyrus that were linked in to get to 1 because of duplication and stuff like that. But James, you missed most of the really cool stuff in the report, so you'll have to go back and watch it. But I'm also recording, so I can fix it all up and record a summarized version later. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I had a couple other sheets on here. And these sheets were just simply used to link other bits of data in the workbook. So again, if you are an Excel snob, you will know exactly what this is for. These are for your VLOOKUPs and other things. You could probably get some sort of details on here if you really wanted to. But the point of this table is just to link it to other sheets to get meaningful information from. So do I have any more papyri dates? Yeah, again, same thing. Papyri dates here used in other parts of the worksheet it's just a reference table for other tables to reference information. So if you wanted to find a date, if you wanted to go with the early or the late estimate, or if you wanted to go with the median, you would use your VLOOKUP here and select whatever column. Okay. So that's not really, that doesn't matter a whole lot, for most people who will use it, but don't delete the table because you will break stuff in the spreadsheet. Yeah. So yeah, sorry. Every published papyrus. Yes. As far as I know, I know there's some other papyrus that are available. I don't know if they contain New Testament texts, and I'm not sure of how because they're prefixed with a T, but I think they link up to some of the P manuscripts. Again, I'm not entirely sure. These are strictly P1 to P141, and I was able to collect all the data. And then I don't think I mentioned this off the start, but I collected the data initially when I was penning in data entering, right? Data entering. When I was data entering the verses under each papyrus manuscript, I initially used the wiki list, and then after I had penned it in, I went and double checked all of that against the INTF's indexing. And so what I noticed was on the wiki list, a bunch, I shouldn't say a bunch, they weren't entirely accurate. It looks like whoever penned some of it in just kind of got lazy and said, well, I'm not going to list the lacunus place on every single page of this manuscript, so I'm just going to put the entire range down. And that's pretty much what they did. So when I went in and double checked that, I actually took those lacunus verses out entirely. So they're not so the spreadsheet is accurate to INTF's website, not to the wiki website. So yeah, full transparency. That's how I went about putting the data in. So some of you are going to ask, Dwayne, how can I get this spreadsheet? How can I play with the data in here and do what I want? Well, I have a link, and I am going to see if I can post the link in here. Does it work? No. Oh, okay, hold on. We will go like this. Show more options. Share. Oh, there it is. Copy link. It's just taking a second to load. I bet you that's totally messing with apply. There we go. All right. Okay, here we go. Here we go. The link is coming. Here it goes. The link is going right there. There you go. So that's on my OneDrive. I have a public folder now. So when I do stuff like this, I can put my documents in the public folders. So you can go ahead and play with the data. It's free of charge. Okay, it's not going to cost anything. You don't need my permission. Just grab the data and do what you want with it. If you really do appreciate the work and want to give something, you can drop something into the chat in the side there, or you can go to the Buy Me a Coffee link and drop a few dollars if you like. Of course, there's no obligation to do that. Just use the data. It's by the church for the church, so use that and do something interesting with the report. If you are good with data, you should be able to use this. It's structured beautifully. I don't think there are any like structural errors, so have fun with that. All right. It says, looks like my last message didn't post, I said. I recommend the text of the earliest New Testament Greek manuscripts compiled by Philip Comfort, which contains full transcriptions of every published ... Yeah, I think Philip Comfort, he has a table in there. Someone was showing me, I think it was Timothy Mitchell, messaged me after I shared the first graph and said, hey, Philip Comfort did something with that. And he's got by chapter the papyrus manuscripts in that, and I think probably in that book specifically. So excuse me. Yeah, so I think the next thing that I would kind of want to do with this data, and I don't excuse me, I don't think it's specific to this data, is I would like to go through, I'm pretty sure somebody has probably already done it, would be to compare some of those verses which have more than one verse support among all the papyri. So if we come back to the spreadsheet, this is where it's going to kind of direct some research, I think. So if I come back to the worksheet and I take a look at the counts, and so these passages here, John 1:26, 1:28, 1:33, 1:35, 1:38, it would be interesting to look at these because there's 6 papyrus manuscripts and to compare them just to see how coherent they are. Now, again, I'm sure somebody has done this. Excuse me. Yeah, it would be interesting to compare all 6 of these papyrus manuscripts which contain this passage and then see how coherent it is, and then see where the papyrus manuscripts deviates from the critical text, and where it deviates from the Byzantine text, and see if there's any correlation. Like, does it deviate from the critical text 50% of the time? And then the other 50% of the time, does it adhere to the Byzantine text? Or does it adhere to Western text? Which kind of text flavor is mostly found? Because what's interesting on here is because when you take a look at some of these manuscripts online, you go to the wiki page, you can click on the Papyrus link, and it'll give you the classification of it. Now, I didn't include the classifications in the spreadsheet. If you wanted to, you could go and do that yourself. But I just don't see, I don't understand. It doesn't seem right when, like, for example, Papyrus 1. Let me go over to Papyrus 1. Okay. Papyrus 1 has 19 verses in it. 19 verses. And I think it's considered Alexandrian. Is 19 verses enough verses to consider a papyrus manuscript Alexandrian? The one that I saw, I can't remember which one. I should have took a note down here. But one of the manuscripts I looked at, one of the papyrus manuscripts I looked at, had 6 verses in it. 6 verses. And it considered that 6-verse papyrus manuscript as being Alexandrian. My question is 6 verses enough to proclaim a papyrus manuscript to be Alexandrian? I don't know. So I mean, initially it sounds far-fetched. So anyway, what I'd like to do is maybe at one point I'll go through and take a look at these in those 6 papyrus manuscripts and see if we can determine what kind of coherence is between them. Again, I think ECM probably has all the data online, and I might be able to do that. But it would be interesting to look at it from a critical text / papyrus perspective, critical text Byzantine perspective. Yeah. Okay. So I think we're pretty much done there. Again, if you want to go and look at the spreadsheet and do what you're going to do with the spreadsheet, have at it. If you come up with any interesting results, I would be curious to see that. Fire me an email and let me know if you found something interesting amongst the data there. So I think we're done with that, and we're going to pop on to the next topic. But before we do, we're going to take a look at the comments. All right. What's going on here? So it looks like my last message, Papyrus in 2 beautiful volumes. Yes. All right. Brandon Back says, sweet. Alan Frisch, $48 USD on Amazon. Good. That's for Philip Comfort's work. That might actually be worthwhile. So I might just, I might do that. It'd be interesting. So I also was able to last week swoop up and grab the Gospels in Swanson's work. So I got Swanson's collations coming in the mail. I know, James, you shared that in the NT Textual Criticism group, but I had snapped that up before I think you even posted that. So sorry for all those who wanted to jump in and buy it, but I got it first. All right. Okay. Yes, but the transcriptions are awesome to have in print all in one place. Yes. So James is complaining that Comfort is notorious for dating manuscripts too early, though. James, just out of curiosity, do you think that the papyri are dated too early? Do you think they're dated too early? I know there's a lot of I don't want to say controversy, but I think a lot of the dates are more tentative than they are anything. Part of the reason why I didn't run too many or create too many reports based on the date. But yeah, I think of those 5 manuscripts that we were talking about, the 5 biggest ones, they all appear before the 4th century. And even non-conservative estimates, I think, put them before the 4th century. So interesting nonetheless. So counterbalance with a hefty dose of Nogbri. Okay. Brandon Back says that would be fun. I'm assuming you are a spreadsheet nerd and you're going to have fun with the data. Ann Calagonit. I don't know how to pronounce your name. A tool to look up verse number and get a list of papyri that contains it would be useful. Well, that's exactly what the spreadsheet will do if you know how to use it. If you go into the worksheet, you can look for any verse. You can sort by verse. You can sort by book. You can filter on book. And you just go across on the sheet there, and it'll list every single papyrus manuscripts that are under that. In fact, you could even make a pivot table to pop the verse reference in there as a field, as a filter field instead. You're going to get a very big table, but you can scroll down to whatever book and verse number you want, and it'll list every papyrus manuscript for that. Easy to do, easily done. You could do it with the data that's there if you are familiar with how Excel works. All right. Friendly neighborhood Jesus Freak says, almost feels like they have a bent and are trying to fit the results into their schema instead of their schema into the results. I think I missed part of that conversation. And then Alden First says, this spreadsheet is super cool, Dwayne. Yes, it is. Super cool. Super nerdy, too. Super nerdy. Yeah, I spent years on Excel sheets, so this came fairly easy. You spend more time trying to figure out what kind of reports you want than trying to figure out how to build the reports. So James Snap says, I suspect that far too many people look at the 50-year swing in both directions and assume that the earliest option is right. P52 being assigned to 125 is an example of this. Yeah. P52 is very well known because it is the oldest, supposedly the oldest, but its median date I have here is, did I not have it here? Oh, I got it hidden. Hang on. Here, let me just, I'll just show you what I'm doing here. So this is in the worksheet portion. I'm going to pop over to P52. For those who don't know, P52 represents, supposedly, I say supposedly, I shouldn't be so, but it is apparently the oldest papyrus manuscript that we contain. And it's just a tiny little fragment. We can even take a look at it in a second here, but I'll unhide these. I had to hide those because of the way I was inputting the data. But P52, here is, am I filtering? No, okay. So we have John 18:37, John 18:31, 32, and 33, and John 18:38. So this is 5 verses. That's it. A couple passages from John 18. So you can get an idea of how to like determine where the passages are based on the spreadsheet. So P52, it's got 5 verses. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Five tiny little verses. Now its median date I have here as 150. So I have collected the data here in here, and if we go to P52. Yeah, it's dated between 125 and 175 with the median date of 150. Yeah, so I don't know. Every time you put a date on a papyri, it's going to be like, what's the term? Fought about. It's going to be fought over. Okay, that's just the way it is. I don't know. You know, as far as I understand it, most papyruses are dated based on somebody who knows the script will go in and look at it and say, wow, that looks kind of like a 1st century script, or that looks like a type of writing they would do in the 3rd century. And so that I think that's typically, that's papyrology. I think that's typically how these are dated. They're not going to do any dating on these, no carbon dating or anything like that. One, because carbon dating is destructive. Nobody wants to destroy pieces of the manuscripts. Okay, nobody wants to do that. And I would assume 2 is very expensive. I think scholars are just looking at it and saying this looks like a script from this date. And apparently, it is relatively accurate. You can get a general idea of when a manuscript was written by the script. Now, again, is that up for debate? Everything in textual criticism is up for debate. So, anyway, we have a couple other topics to go on to. It's already 10:15. We've been here for an hour. Man, you guys lasted an hour on a spreadsheet. Kudos to you for making it this far. So the context was regarding classifying manuscript. Oh, there we go. And Mr. Moreno says, this can all be avoided. Embrace the truth. Embrace the bize. Embrace the bize. I can hear the sarcasm in that. Just for context, for those who may not know, Codex Bize is the worst manuscript, Codex D, that there is to base any decisions off of. You know that terrible Mark 141 reading in the NIV Bible? You know that Jesus was angry at the people who came to him for healing? Yeah, that's in Codex D. That's in Codex Bize. It's only in Codex Bezae. Okay, it's not a good manuscript. Yeah, I could probably do a video on Codex Bezae. It would be an interesting video. But nonetheless, we have some other things to look at today. Now, I'm going to pop my notes up real quick here. And we will go on to the next. Oh, no, I just accidentally opened Logos. I clicked on Logos. Logos is such a resource hog. I'm going to close it. Hang on. All right. Okay. I wanted to just take a quick look at this find in the recently announced this week. We're going to go to a Fox News article, of all things, a Fox News article. We're going to leave politics out of this. You can go on Facebook and discuss politics all you want. I just find that needlessly changes the tone of the conversation. All right. So archaeologists uncover, let's see here. Archaeologists uncover earliest known evidence of Christianity north of the Alps, unusual for this time. So I popped the map open here, and Hessen. Now, I didn't know this. I have a few friends. His name is Mike, and we were telling a story a long time ago. We were young kids, and they were talking about how, in the newspaper you get that you get the word puzzle in there, and they give you all the little clues, and you got to do the little crossword, right, and figure out what the word is. Well, one of the words turned out to be Hessen, and nobody in our group of friends knew what a Hessen was. We looked it up in a dictionary, and it wasn't in the dictionary, and so what we decided to do was to assign our own definition to the word Hessen, because it was in this newspaper's crossword. And so we assigned Hessen to be a group of Mikes. Yeah, like how a group of geese is called a gaggle and a group of cows is called a herd. Well, we just called a group of Mikes a Hessen. But while I was looking at this today, I realized that Hessen is a place in Germany. So sorry, Mike, you can't use that. It's the name of a very old place in Germany. So there you go. We know what a Hessen is now. And you're in on that little story there. So anyway, in this place, Hessen, Germany, there was discovered a burial site with a skeleton and a guy's amulet in there. And in the amulet was a rolled up silver scroll containing Latin text in it. Now, they had known apparently about this scroll for a number of years, but they were unable to unroll it and determine what was actually written inside of it because it was extremely brittle with time, and so they didn't want to damage the scroll by unrolling it. So a few years go by, and somebody gets this idea saying, hey, you know what? We should see if we can scan it and then unroll it digitally. And that's exactly what they did. So to give you an idea, this is the burial site, and this little guy here is the scroll that was inside the amulet. Not the Bee posted a brief article on this. This is what it looked like as it was digitally unrolled. This wasn't physically unrolled; it was digitally unrolled, and there's enough in there to make out a number of letters and phrases and sentences and things, and we'll take a look at what that means. But what's interesting is that one is where this is located. So this is located, this area here. This is Hessen. We're probably getting a lot of sibilance in the microphone from saying Hessen. I misheard. Yeah. But yeah, so this is interesting. Why? Because this is north of the Alps, and all the news articles that are reading about this is making a big deal about how far north of the Alps this is, because they date this text to be somewhere between 230 and 270 AD. So this is early 3rd century. So just to give you more perspective, if you take a look at the map here, Rome is kind of the place where Christianity spread. Rome and Jerusalem down here, Christianity spread. All of Greece, modern day Turkey. So you have Christianity spreading around the coast, But to find it so far north apparently was a really, really, really big deal. And what was even more interesting about this, as I read the articles, typically when you find religious artifacts early that far north, they're usually mixed in with some pagan thoughts or some Jewish ideas, and it's not just Christian ideals. But this scroll was, quote, purely Christian. So you have purely Christian believers, apparently, north of the Alps on the northern edge of the Roman Empire by the early 3rd century. Now, I mean, we're not entirely surprised by that. We know that Christianity spread rather quickly, and I think we can probably thank the persecution for that, which caused Christians to disperse. We read about that in the book of Acts, when there was persecution amongst the Christians for stoning Stephen. It caused the Christians to go out into all different places, and they took Christianity with them, right? They took the gospel with them. So yeah, the persecutions add to the spread of Christianity. So yeah, it's not like, this isn't like, oh my goodness, this is like it's not the craziest find, but it's an interesting find. So excuse me. So you're probably wondering, what is written on the scroll? So there's another site here. This is from Archaeology News, and it has a much better coverage than the Fox News article. But yeah, so this is the amulet. This is tiny. I think it's only like 3 inches, 3 inches wide. Like it's not very big. And inside this kind of case is the roll, and you can see the scroll inside there. And this was worn. I guess a string would be strung through there, maybe worn around the neck. I don't know. That might be conjecture. But it wasn't around his neck when they found it. It was just kind of like off to the side in a jar. But yeah, we'll come to the translation in a second here. But again, this is what it looked like when they digitally unrolled it. So they just scanned it, and they had some computer software to go through and to determine where the layers were and what was on each layer, and then they just used it to do what you're seeing here on the screen. So this is what it looked like. And somebody drew on it to get the general idea of what characters are on there. Again, this isn't Greek. I know it would be interesting if it was Greek, but we're talking like Northern Roman Empire. It's going to be very, very Latin, right? And so this is a Latin script. And on the Latin script is written this. Let me zoom in. Make that nice and big for everybody. There we go. So it says, the Frankfurt silver inscription translated into English is this: in the name of Saint Titus. So there's some uncertainty, right? Granted, this is like a 2,000-year-old document, so there's a little bit of uncertainty. So in the name of Saint Titus, holy, 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 in the name of Jesus Christ, Son of God, the Lord of the world, resists to the best of his ability all seizures or setbacks. The God grants well-being admission. So this is like a scroll of blessing. Maybe this was created for the purpose of this person's death. Kind of like, we would add a note into the casket of a loved one who passed away or something like that. Maybe this was left in a similar vein, or maybe this belonged to him, who knows, and it was just buried with him because it was his. But nonetheless, this seems to be a scroll of blessing. This rescue device, there you go. So it's a charm. They're treating it like a charm. This rescue device protects the person who surrenders to the will of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, again, there's some question there. This may not be a device. It could be something else. Again, purely Christian, talking about these sorts of rescue devices. That would be a little bit strange, to be honest. The context would be a little bit weird. But then again, that could be my 21st century Christian context. But anyway, so protects the person who surrenders to the will of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, since before Jesus Christ bend all knees, the heavenly ones, the earthly, and the subterranean, and every tongue confess to Jesus Christ. Excuse me. So what's interesting here is this last little passage here in text critical land. We would go, oh, look, there's a document that contained parts of Philippians 2, 9-10. Like, isn't that cool? We have an allusion. I don't know if this is an allusion or if this is a word for word, or pretty close to word for word. Again, this is Latin, right? We're talking about a Latin translation of Greek text in an amulet in the early 200s. But nonetheless, it's a reference to Philippians 2, 9-10. I mean, we could pull that up really quickly just to read that. Most of you probably know it off by heart. I should know it off by heart, and I do. But when you have a camera on you, you don't know things off by heart. That's just how it rolls. 2, 9 to 10. Yeah, there we go. Therefore, God has also highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name. Did my stream die? No, I'm still going. Okay, sorry. I'm getting distracted by some of the stuff coming on my screen. All right. So therefore, God has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You see, what we're looking at there is a definite allusion to Philippians 2, 9 to 10. So you have the influence of the Apostle Paul's writings in the early 3rd century up in the northern part of the Roman Empire, up and over and around the Alps. So this is kind of touted as a big deal, not necessarily for its text critical stuff. Again, this verse is attested to in many other places. So, but because of the purely Christian component of this scroll at such an early time period in such a far geographic relation to the spread of Christianity, or from the epicenters of Christianity. Interesting find. I think it's neat. Is it groundbreaking? Not for us who believe. We already know, right? But nonetheless, something you can put in your pocket for, again, that sort of apologetic value. Really cool. I just saw that come up this week and figured I gotta talk about that. So we're gonna do one last thing here. I suspect that this last one is probably going to be the longest one, and we're already at 1 hour and 15 minutes. But I wanted to talk about the distigmai. There we go. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the distigmai in Codex Vaticanus because Dr. Gordon Nehemiah has finalized his paper and published it. It's on Brill. It is currently publicly available, which I thought was kind of strange. We're going to take a look at some of that paper and share some of the results. The TLDR version of it is the distigmai are not early. And I think this pretty much puts a cap in that conversation. Now, granted, I don't think that it's going to be convincing to everybody, because I think what happens is some people hold on to certain things and they just don't want to let it go. But I think this one, you have to let it go. It's not the distigmai are not references to early. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to pull that up here. So this is the Brill article. I'm going to be a little careful with this because I don't want to get a copyright strike. Just recently on our church page, I got a copyright strike on one of our sermons because our guest speaker used a news article talking about fathers in a public school setting and how they made a great impact for society. Well, it turns out that news article made YouTube go, hey, that's a copyright issue. You can't use that. And so they actually hid the video and nobody could watch it. So I had to go in and mute that section in order for people to view it. So I was actually surprised to see that today. Interesting. So anyway, with that being said, I will have to be very careful here. So this is the paper by Nehemiah Gordon. So just a little bit of background here. Let me, I'm going to pop up my notes here just to make sure I got everything that I need. Nope, not that one. There it is. Yeah, we can pull this up. So this kind of started back in, I think, 1995. Now I'm going to pull this up here. This is just a picture of Codex Vaticanus. And what had happened is in Codex Vaticanus, Dr. Philip Payne, he took a look at Codex Vaticanus and noticed what we now know today as distigmai. And what distigma are two dots, just two little dots in the margins of the text. And he discovered that what they really are is they are referencing a textual variant. It's just a small note in the margin, just two dots, that basically says on this line represents a place where there's a textual variation that we know about. So the question became did those two dots, do they represent something that is early? Were they penned down with the original writing of the manuscript, or did they come later, right? Because the implications is if the distigmai were penned with the original text, then that means that they were witnessing to textual issues in the 4th century, okay? In the 4th century. So yeah, it's becoming a point of referencing, or a potential way of referencing textual variants which were known back in the 400s that were not known today, or vice versa. So let's take a look at Vaticanus first, just so you can see the distigmai. The very specific one is on 1474. And the reason why I'm going here is because this is a passage in 1 Corinthians 14, 1474, that Philip Payne believes is a reference. Oh, what is going on here? Is a reference to something that's very early. And the reason why is because this is the infamous passage about women remaining silent in the churches, and if they have a question, to go and ask their husbands at home. This is the passage of 1 Corinthians 14:16, and it's in the first column here. And specifically, I'm going to zoom right in. I'm just going to check, make sure I'm sharing my screen. I am. Good. Is this set of 2 dots here. Okay, they were called umlauts back in the day, but now everybody refers to them as distigmai. So I'm going to refer to them as distigmai. I'm not going to use umlauts anymore. In fact, after the last video where I talked about this a number of months ago, I got an email saying, don't call them umlauts, call them distigmai. So I'm calling them distigmai. I'm calling them distigmai. So this is the passage in question. Now, I'm not going to read that in Greek just because, but just know that these 2 dots are what the fuss is all about. Now, if you take a look at the 2 dots over here, they are slightly different. These dots here are what's called the apricot color. They are the color of apricots. And then these ones here, well, they're kind of chocolate. That's the reference, apricot and chocolate. So the other thing to notice about Vaticanus, again, going into a little bit of history about this issue, is this. You'll notice that the text on Vaticanus, there is apricot letters and there are chocolate letters. Well, why? Because presumably the letters in apricot represent the letters as it was originally written down by the scribe in the 4th century. Then, as the letters began to fade, there was suggestion that maybe the mixture for the ink wasn't that great, and the letters began to fade very shortly after it was put down. Somebody went over the letters in a different ink to kind of pull them back out again, and that came later. Now, how late? We don't entirely know. I think the last estimate was put somewhere around the 10th century. Someone went again and redid the letters on this. So you have the 4th century witness here as the apricot, and then you have the 10th century witness as the one who went over the text. And then the question then is, did this get done by the one who initially did this color here, or did this happen? Or another option is, were all of the distigmai in there and then somebody went over them again with the chocolate colored ink? Okay. So there, again, the reason why this is important is because if these are original to the manuscript, then these are referencing textual variants that we knew about today. Okay. So yeah, there's some question about 1 John 5:7. I think I'm going to avoid that question for the time being. But there are 3 dots by 1 John 5:7. So anyway, so here's what's happening. So this is the passage in 1 Corinthians 14:34-35. Again, Dr. Payne is an egalitarian. So for him to see distigmai near this verse suggests to him that it was early known that this passage wasn't part of Scripture, and so we shouldn't be using that to support any sort of complementarian view. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the discussion about egalitarian and complementarianism. I'm more of a complementarian myself. However, I want to discuss the issue with the distigmai without getting distracted. So now you come to the article, and well, I'll just leave it here for now. The first thing that we notice here is, what do we got here? Is the shortcomings of the kind of testing. So in the article, what's happening here is the complaint is essentially that Dr. Payne, when he's looking at the manuscript, trying to determine what's chocolate and what's apricot, the whole idea of trying to look at a color and determine what's more lighter and darker is too subjective. So what Gordon Nehemiah does is he comes over here with a fancy machine, an X-ray something or other. It's a very scientific term. I didn't dive too much into the science. I read the article through, but just kind of picked out some of the more important information. But basically what it is, XRF testing gives us an objective number to determine whether the ink is actually different or if it's just a matter of the way it faded over the history of the manuscript. So the first thing he does is, I'll just quote him here. He does give us a few shortcomings of XRF testing. And he says this in the article: before carrying out the second step of our protocol using XRF, see below, we needed to determine whether a specific spot was a good candidate for further testing. So how this testing works is it's a machine that looks at a specific point on the manuscript, and there's a sense in which it drills through it. And what it's doing is it's picking up every layer of stuff that's in the manuscript. So in this instance, because Vaticanus represents a text which has been in there and then faded and then written over, you're going to get parts of the text which is written over in the XRF testing. You're also going to get that contaminated with the text below that, and then you're going to get that contaminated with the papyrus, the vellum underneath that. And then if there's writing on the other side of the vellum, you're going to contaminate it with those results as well. So specific areas of the manuscript had to be selected to minimize that stacking effect. That stacking effect is my own words. And of course, they did find a number of places. So it involved partly with establishing a baseline for how just the manuscript would impact the results. And then that baseline could be subtracted from the results of the test being done on the ink. So that's kind of what's happening. So it goes, with some exceptions, any spot with more than one layer of ink cannot produce meaningful test results. This is because the XRF spectrometer cannot distinguish between the signal it receives from one layer of ink and that which it receives from another. Multiple layers of ink can be a problem from re-inking, but also from ink on the other side of the page, since X-rays pass through the parchment. Excuse me. For each test, we had to examine the exact spot we wanted to test using transmission light. That is, shine a light through the back of the parchment in order to verify that there was nothing on the other side. So what he's saying is in his methodology of determining the dates, determining the makeup, it's not dates, he's determining the makeup of the ink. And from the makeup of the ink, we can determine the date with which that specific ink was penned in. So that's how he overcomes it, looking for spots which contain just that specific thing being tested. Now, the other thing that's important in this discussion is that the type of ink that is used in determining, the type of ink that's used in writing. So there's various different features on Codex Vaticanus. Screen makes no sense with the subject. The distigmai. There, I'll just leave it there. So there's essentially there's not two types of ink, but I'm going to simplify it this way: is that there are two types of ink. There's a third type of ink which is really old. That's not in the question here. But then there's a type of iron gall ink, and what often happens with this is it's used to write. This is kind of like the older type of ink. But then there's another kind of vitriolic ink. It's really angry. It makes fun of a lot of people. No, it's called vitriolic just based on the stuff that it's made. But what would often happen is in the early 15th century, the way this vitriolic ink was made changed. So in one sense, in the old way, it would not be purified. The vitriol stuff that they gain from, I forget where, I think it's like some sort of flour or something. It would contain a bit of copper in there, as well as some other trace elements. And so they would dip their pen in and they would write it down, and the ink would contain some of that copper. But then what would happen later is in the early 15th century, they would drop some iron into there, and that iron would actually cause the copper to precipitate out of the ink. And this was sort of this wasn't the purpose of putting the iron. The purpose of putting the iron into this was to get the copper out. It was a way of mining a way of mining copper. But a side effect was you were left over with this like copperless ink. And so this ink was used later because the process became rather standardized and was used all over the place. And so the end result, you get this handful of copper that you could sell on the market, and then you get a little bit of this, this ink that you can sell to your monastery. You can write down their manuscripts with, or I don't know if it was sold or if it was given, like it was just a waste product. I don't know. It doesn't go into a whole lot of details there. But you can tell based on how much copper is in the ink, whether it was after the 15th century or whether it occurred before the 15th century. So what the XFR testing does is it determines the kinds of metal that are found in the ink and how much. So this is kind of the basis. Very simplified. If Gordon were to, or if Dr. Nehemiah Gordon were to watch this, he'd probably complain that it was oversimplified. But nonetheless, I'm simplifying this. So that's essentially how it works. So by purifying the ink, you get that copper, and then you get this vitriolic ink. Not vitriolic as in angry. It's just apparently a reference to the type of material that's in the ink. So he went through, did his testing, and here's some of the results that he posted out here. So I'm going to quote him. So the first major result of our tests was that there was no difference between any of the distigmai, regardless if they were apricot or chocolate, as far as the XRF testing could detect. So again, based on the results of the testing, whether it looked apricot or whether it looked chocolate, they seemed to be the same kind of ink according to the XRF testing. Then there's distigmai that is said to have been added later. Okay, and this distigmai that were said to be added later, they were identical to the apricot and the chocolate distigmai. Now, the distigmai on the 15th century replacement page. Okay, this is specifically referencing the book of Hebrews. Let me see if I can pull one up here. Yeah, you notice it's minuscule script. Okay, minuscule script, that's not 4th century. I promise you that's not 4th century. I don't know which book this is. This could be Hebrews. But Hebrews was damaged and then replaced in the 15th century. So when they did the testing on the ink, on the replacement pages, they also noticed that there was no difference between the ink on the replacement page to the apricot and the chocolate distigmai. Okay, again, this is a quote. This is a quote from the Bro Report. The distigmai on the 15th century replacement page, so the distigmai on the replacement page, was also no different from the apricot and the chocolate distigmai. See, we're getting a picture here is as they continue to do the testing, the chocolate and the apricot distigmai have the same fingerprint as the ones on these replacement pages that we know came after the 15th century. So the distigmai, whether apricot or chocolate, were not written in the same inks as the original text, nor were they written in the same ink as the re-inking. Okay, so understand what he's saying here. The re-inked pages, let me see if I can pull one up here. Oh. Yeah, let's see if I can find. Yeah, so the original ink, so the 4th century ink, the scribe copying it, the 4th century ink, okay, the distigmai, they are not the same ink as that. And then the scribe who went and re-inked everything, copied over everything, the distigmai, whether apricot or chocolate, is still not the same ink as the re-inking. It's totally different. Now, I summarized a part of the report. I call it a report. It's paper. It's corporate me coming out. So summarizing the results, the ink used for the distigmai was clearly different from the original ink of Vaticanus, and it was clearly different from the ink that was copied, but it was the same as the distigmai all over many other places of the manuscript, whether it was the newer added in pages or the older pages. And then he quotes again the hypothesis that the apricot distigmai was written in the same ink as the visually similar original ink of the main text was reasonable, but has now been disproven by XRFC. So Dr. Nehemiah Gordon seems to be expressing a certain amount of certainty here, that just because the apricot distigmai and the chocolate distigmai appear different in color or different in tone, the XRF testing is showing that they're actually the same. It goes on to say the ink of the chocolate and apricot distigmai match the characteristics of the ink in the table of contents. And we know that the table of contents in Codex Vaticanus ranged from 1571 to 1581. They are 16th century. They match the characteristics of the ink on the 16th century table of contents. And then the Roman numeral chapter headings in the Old Testament of Codex Vaticanus, which we know occurred after 1571, the distigmai also match those Roman numeral chapter headings. So it looks like, I mean, I don't know how else to say this. It really looks like these are from the 16th century, and the 16th century. And it really looks like any idea of suggesting that these distigmai were from the 4th century, based on the color, just didn't work out in the end. And James is going in there about Sepulveda in 2022. Yeah, we can take a look at his article. I think I got his link here, but I did read that in preparation for this. And then there's one other thing about the replacement pages. The ink of the replacement pages was not chemically purified, but the ink of the distigmai on the replacement pages was. Now, this is why this is interesting, because the whoever wrote the replacement pages wrote it earlier than the person who put the distigmai on. So that gets rid of any idea that whoever copied that page also copied over the distigmai. So it looks like, under all accounts, Dr. Philip Payne's theory that the distigmai are early are completely false. So it didn't work. It really looks like. I would be curious to see his response to the paper. I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But yeah, it looks like it's done. You take the recent finds of James Snap in 2022, discovered based on a textual variant, I think, in the book of Acts. It's the only place we know of as of textual variant is there in Vaticanus with the distigmai, and involving, I think it was the Complutensian polyglot, and in some annotations from Sepulveda, we see him reference that, along with, quote, 365 places in Vaticanus which depart from, I think it's the Textus Receptus. And I think he was looking at this for the Complutensian polyglot. What do you call it? People who put compilers. That's it. Now, James also made an interesting theory, is that maybe instead of 365, a copyist who copied the annotations made a mistake and put 365, but really meant 765, which would match up the number of variants that, the number of umlauts that are in Codex Vaticanus. But yeah, beyond that, I think linking together that passage in Acts with Sepulveda really hammers it home. Like there's so much at this point going for the late usage of the distigmai. I think it would be a really intense uphill battle, probably an upward cliff climb, to be able to negate these results. So unless there is something in Gordon Nehemiah's methodology that is totally lax, nothing stuck out to me while I was looking at this, then I think this is probably the death knell of the early distigmai. The early distigmai comments. So that's it. Now, so let's read his conclusion together. Hopefully I won't get in trouble for doing this. It's Brill, right? I'm surprised that this article doesn't cost like $300. Okay. All right. Conclusion. Let's see. Am I on here? Yes, I am. Let's make this bigger. Can I make it bigger? Oh, what are you doing? Excuse me. All right, conclusion. This study builds on the pioneering work of Philip Payne, who discovered the distigmai in Codex Vaticanus nearly 30 years ago and recognized their text-critical function. It also continues the legacy of Paul Canart, who carried out paleographical observations of Codex Vaticanus at the end of the last century using innovative magnification techniques. Okay, like let's be clear here. Just because it didn't work out that they were early, Philip Payne did discover, along with Paul Canart, that the distigmai referenced textual variation. So it's not a loss. It's not a total loss for Philip Payne. It's a loss for his theory that 1 Corinthians 14, 34 to 36. It's a loss for that theory, but overall, I mean, the fact that they are references to text critical functions it was a good discovery. So all right, so some 20 years ago, Patrick Andrist warned about relying solely on the color of the distigmai to prove their antiquity, as a visual resemblance is no guarantee of identity. A spectrometric analysis of the ink would perhaps clarify this question. Some 15 years ago, Payne himself noted a similar caution when he wrote Confirmation Awaits Scientific Testing, such as multispectral imaging or X-ray fluorescent imaging. So micro X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy has now proven that all the distigmai tested, now that's a quantifier, okay, tested. I suspect that Dr. Payne will come back and say, well, he didn't test the one in 1 Corinthians 15. I think he was actually asking that question in a few exchanges. 1 Corinthians 14. But he goes on to say tested. So everyone he tested, it stands to reason. I think he tested 35 or 36, somewhere around there. I could be wrong. I would think that's a pretty decent, especially when they're all late. Anyway, so both apricot and chocolate were written in chemically purified inks, typical of the 16th century or later. Despite appearances, the apricot distigmai tested were not written in the same ink as the original main text or original horizontal lines, the paragraphy. Again, I just ignored that. I read through the section about paragraphy. I didn't think it was entirely relevant to the discussion here, just to keep it a little bit shorter because we're going on 2 hours here. So anyway, any similarity in color between the ink of the apricot distigmai and the original ink is purely coincidental and entirely superficial, and therefore can no longer be cited as evidence for an early date of the distigmai. Similarly, the chocolate distigmai and the re-inking of the main text utilized radically different inks, and hence any similarities in appearance is also purely coincidental. The strongest argument for a late date was always the existence of distigmai on the 15th century minuscule replacement pages. The counter-argument was that these distigmai were copied from a damaged original page as part of the original production of the replacement pages. However, the ink of a distigmai tested on one of the replacement pages is identical to that of all the other distigmai, apricot and chocolate, and entirely dissimilar from that of the main text on the replacement pages. Hence, the distigmai on the replacement pages are not part of the original production of these pages, but rather a paratextual element added later along with all the other distigmai. Finally, this is a bit of a burn. Finally, this study should serve as a warning about reaching definitive paleographical or codicological conclusions based on visual appraisal of the color of ink alone. So there you have it. I'll be curious to see what Dr. Payne says about this. Now, I haven't yet reached out to him. I don't know if I'm going to reach out to Dr. Payne. I might or might not. But I did reach out to Dr. Nehemiah Gordon. Today I sent him an email. I actually sent him an email asking him if he would come on the channel and talk about the results. And he said he couldn't yet because he wanted to publish the paper. Now that the paper is published, I sent another email out to him. So hopefully he'll come on the channel and I'll be able to ask him all about the process of how he got the details of the distigmai. And I think that would make an interesting video set. So that is it. That's all I got. That's it for today. So let's pop over to the comments there. We'll read some comments and I'll give you a few updates with a couple of things and then we'll head off for the evening. All right. So here we got Pastor Brett. Pastor Brett is in the house. How's it going, Pastor Brett? Hope things are well. Pastor Brett, JF, where is the wrench? I took it away from him. The responsibility was more than he could bear, and he didn't want it anymore. So it's all good. Mr. Moreno says, it's at least a reference to the Christ hymn in Philippians 2. Yes. Some interpreters hold that Paul is quoting a pre-existing hymn, while others think he composed it himself. Yeah, I don't really know. To me, I think that would be speculative either way. So I just, it's inspired scripture. I'm happy to say that. I just don't see myself devoting a whole lot of time trying to determine if Paul wrote it or if it was a hymn around at the time. But nonetheless, all right. That unto me every knee shall bow. Yes, Pastor Brett, how's it going? I returned it since it wasn't mine to yield. There you go. The wrench chose you. It is your destiny. With great power comes great responsibility. All right. YouTube is insane. Yes, going on the weird copyright thing. Yeah, that channel isn't monetized, so it doesn't really impact any monetization, but it really did impact the message. Like, that was a pretty important piece to my friend's message there. Anyway. All right. I think that means non-commercial use permitted with attribution. Okay, I see. Yeah, non-commercial use permitted with attribution. Yeah, so this is a Brill article written by Dr. Nehemiah Gordon. Okay. This is not my original work. I'm not plagiarizing anything. There are 3 dots that testify. You're right. There are 3 dots that testify. And these 3 are one, right? Consubstantial. All right. And the chocolate, the apricot, and the tangerine agree. Screen makes no sense with subject. Adrian Mason says, thanks. James Snap, James, you're going to have to get on the page and just write a big fat I told you so. There was a couple references to Sepulveda. And James, even you in this, you were referenced in this paper as the one who holds this idea that the copy of Sepulveda's annotations had a mistake in it. And instead of 365, should have been 765. Maybe not. Personally, James, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. But it's an interesting theory. All right. And then lastly, Mr. Moreno says, so they're Romish dots. I guess so. All right. Good. All right. So just a couple plans here that's going to be happening with the channel, with the views, with the YouTubes, all that kind of stuff. Here is Christmas is around the corner. So I'm not sure if anything's going to be posted next week. Definitely not Wednesday. I am not videoing anything on Wednesday. I do have a couple interviews coming up. So I'm going to be talking to Heaven Jones again. We're going to talk about the theft of manuscripts during the war. So there's going to be some really, there's a lot of drama surrounding manuscripts. First century Mark is not like, it's not the only thing. There's lots of drama involving like black markets and shady dealers, and the manuscript world is pretty cutthroat and bizarre. So I'm going to talk to Heaven Jones about that, and then I have Sean from Rev Reads. He's going to come on, and he is. He's a majority text guy. He's a pastor. And so I just want to ask him, like, how did you get to that spot? What do you do? How do you work all these things? Blah, 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 right? So it'll be good to have just another pastor come on who is aware of some of the issues, not as deeply studied on them, but nonetheless on how he handles them with his congregation. I think that'll be a really interesting video. And then coming into the New Year, there's a couple other things lined up. I'm also working on lining up a few other things. The RP text, I'm sure people are wondering about that. It's RP 2025. We are looking to have that completed in 2025. We have a deadline. I'm not going to share the deadline yet because I don't have approval from the rest of the group to do so. Excuse me. Yeah, so we are aiming to have things done in 2025. We're still working on it. We're plugging away at some of the commentary, validating some manuscripts and some readings for this special 50 variant. That's really what's holding everything up right now, is that 50 variant, that 50 textual variants that are more important than the rest. So chances are, if I've talked about it on this video. It's probably going to be in there in this video, but on this channel. It's probably going to be in there amongst a number of others. We just kind of like chose 50 variants, which we thought were some of the more important ones. And we're going to provide all of the, all of the unsealed data for it, a couple minuscules with some other details, and then have an appendix with a commentary on each of the a brief commentary on those. So yeah, we haven't dropped it. We haven't forgotten about it. Work is progressing. We are progressing, and it will be done. So it's going to be the RP 2025. So we'll have details when we are able to start taking pre-orders. So that's another hurdle that we've got to get over, but we will. So all right, last couple comments here. Wait, we're not getting the Dwayne Green Canadian Christmas special? maybe. I was thinking about doing just a little special video and then releasing it on like a timer to drop on Christmas Day or something. Then I don't have to be present, and it'll just go and you can get your textual critical fix on Christmas Day. Don't tell your wives. Just kidding. All right. Baby Gremlins, Dwayne, please do some Septuagint Old Testament textual criticism. Maybe. I don't know yet. I'm not sure what to do with the Old Testament stuff. But yeah, I know Stephen Hackett at Biblical Studies and Reviews has started touching on a number of the Septuagint stuff, and he's been producing some really interesting stuff. So yeah, definitely go check him out, Biblical Studies and Reviews. All right. Can he use the readings from Vaticanus, or should he hold to Byzantine LXX manuscript priority? Yeah, that's a whole other world I know very little about. All right, have a great Christmas. I'm unlikely to catch any video this side of 2025 now. All right, Adrian, thanks for popping by. We'll see you around. We'll see you in the new year. And then Baby Gremlin says, yeah, sure, if he wants to go Byzantine LXX, that would be fine. I know Byzantine is definitely his favorite. All right. Well, guys, thanks for hanging around. This has been about 2 hours, almost. We went about an hour and 50 minutes. All right, so we'll catch you probably in the new year. All right, brothers and sisters, until next time, we'll see you around.